I'm Andy Nelson. I'm the Chief Information Officer for the Ministry of Justice, and I'm also the Chief Information Officer for Her Majesty's Government. We have used Sophia and Sophia Plus as a key part of developing our IT organisation here. And we went through a transformation journey starting in 2009. In fact, when I joined, one of the key challenges I had was to create a single IT function. And we had to design the model for that. And we had to put down some real clear role descriptions for people and some clear structure in that. And Sophia Plus underpinned that. Certainly one key piece. The second piece BCS helped us with is saying for people, a question I would have had is, so how do I develop my career? What are the paths through? It's almost a classic IT question I found previously in my career of, well, the only people who get to the top are project managers or whatever, you know, how do I actually achieve that? And so another piece of work BCS did was to help us put together an initial career path model, which we've certainly used since, although there's lots more still to do with it, to actually help people develop their careers. And those would be the biggest things that it's helped with. I think that's a key question, I think, in terms of government, of how far we go on that journey. So if we talk about IT professionalism as a whole, I am head of profession in my role as Chief Information Officer of the UK Government. And it's something I feel passionately about trying to develop our capability. And we're doing a number of aspects in there where, again, we're using Sophia and Sophia Plus to underpin it. And one aspect of that is how far we go on the accreditation journey. I do believe it's important for IT to be recognised better as a profession. I think we've got some real questions to think through how far you take that in the accreditation journey. Are we all the way to, we're like the legal profession, and you have to have formal qualifications? I don't personally believe that's where we need to go. But should we just stick with somebody like me as an example? Would you find some accreditation and labels behind my name? Am I Prince qualified or some other accreditation? No, you wouldn't. Would you find it would appear to have been success in my career without that? Yes. However, as I now look at my staff and I talk to people, I think people are seeing increasing value in, be it the Prince badge as an example, or TOGAF, some sort of other accreditation. And I think that's helpful for staff. So that's a key point. It helps them as individuals develop, and it helps them as they're moving on in their careers. I think they're seeing increasing value in that as they move between roles. I also think it could help us in terms of being seen with greater credibility as a profession within government, and be seen comparable to other professions in government. Let me respond first with kind of, if I was going down that as a, as a tick list and my perspective on it. So I would see, and maybe this is a government perspective rather than a private sector perspective. My career is mostly in the private sector. I see recruitment as a bigger challenge than retention, and I'll come back to that. Now, identifying capabilities, not particularly. I don't see it as a big issue, but the nurturing the talent, the succession planning, and building the right capability, and those things all kind of go together. So if we're in a challenging government, particularly in recruitment, and that's because of things like salary, as an example. So I would say, I haven't got the latest market stats, but if I broadly say once you get up to about 50k earning power, we're comparable, I think, to private sector. As you start to get beyond that, the differential grows hugely, so particularly in central government here in our London marketplace. So I found it very challenging to recruit people. Yeah, not such a big issue on retention, frankly. So if it's a big challenge to recruit, then although I've had great success at senior levels, it's been more difficult. We've recruited some good people. So our bigger challenge then becomes you've got to develop the workforce you've got. And that's where the whole professionalism capability piece comes in, and that's a lot of work to do. So I see a bigger challenge for us in how do we develop our staff, nurture the talent. So be it a Ministry of Justice example, we're starting to run some talent management schemes as we identify the best talent. And that links very nicely to succession planning. If you can't recruit in enough people at certain levels, you've got to grow them to create that succession. So that's kind of certainly in a government perspective how I see it hanging together, and it's a bigger challenge in government than I've found doing CIO roles in the private sector. And so I think the flow, it starts with you need to have a very clear view of your operating model as an IT function. And you need to keep refreshing that and thinking ahead as technologies and other things move on. So it starts with what's our clear operating model, what do we retain? So in an internal IT capability, what are we retaining? Where do we actually go to outsourcers to provide a certain service? Maybe we buy managed services. So for example, here in the Ministry of Justice, we bought 2 managed services to complement some capability and bring some capability. One is in the space of information assurance, where we have some good people internally, but we've had a model for years, we keep buying in endless contractors. It'd be better to have a service. And the second thing would be in the architecture space, again, a very challenging community to recruit into. We bought a service in there. So the first thing is about the model. In that model, what's your balance between internal people, maybe some managed services and some contractor usage, but we've been driving down a journey here in government, and certainly the Ministry of Justice, reducing the number of contractors. So that's kind of the first stage. The stage beyond that is continually doing workforce planning. You keep monitoring that and monitoring it. And almost on a week-on-week, month-on-month basis, the other thing we've put quite a lot of structure around is demand management. And that's all about, as you think about what the business is needing, we'd have a business plan for a year, but as that evolves, demands change. How do you keep reacting to that? So you can have that future operating model, a clear workforce plan allowing for the business plan, but things change all the time, so you've got to keep monitoring that to react to it. And that collectively is how we manage it here. I think in setting that future model, you're being very clear to staff about where you're heading. Yes, so being very clear to staff about where you're heading, clear about the structure within the department, back to the career path point earlier, you put those things together, yes, that helps. It then helps people, and we've still got plenty of journey to go on here in government, I think, on this. It helps people to develop their careers, but we're in a classic place where you find the maths won't be quite right. Let's say it's a third. A third of staff are kind of knocking on your door about where's my next role and how can I develop when I'm proactively managing my career. There's a third at the bottom end of kind of, well, that's your job, isn't it, as the boss and the senior management team to manage my career for me. And then there's people in the middle kind of just not quite sure how to handle it. So I think those things go together. I think the other piece is I'm a huge fan of really good staff engagement. So another thing that isn't about careers and so on is about continuing to listen to staff. So yes, we've run an annual staff survey here. We have communication champions, we have newsletters, staff meetings. I run staff forums every month, getting feedback from the front line. So I think another key part of, in a challenging world, government, isn't it? Cost cutting, IT doesn't always get the best press in government. You can feel if you're working in a department, is this a good place to be? The staff engagement piece is another key part of managing that attrition piece. I think some of them are still classic challenges that haven't changed. So if I think about my space here, and some are maybe more extreme than others. So first is cost pressures, not new, but I suppose in current economic climate it's even tougher than before. So there's a big cost pressure piece. However, that's allied to a huge agenda of change. So government has a huge agenda of change. And so they themselves need to operate much more efficiently and effectively. And no surprise, as you follow that journey, you can do some simple headcount cuts. So at some point you have to change the way the place works. Then you're back round to, hang on a minute, don't we need some technology to help us do that? For the technology community, CIOs have sort of drive down their cost base. So those are two big pieces. I think the continuing one of business engagement, how well does IT align with the business, is one that's not gone away. It's still here today. And then I think it is, again, government wouldn't be unusual for any big organisation. How do you harness new technologies coming along and the pace of that with, I've got this huge legacy I've got to deal with. I've got to run that legacy. So all those challenges are running and facing CIOs, and you need to work your way through the balance of all of that. And beneath it, if you're going to succeed in any of that, I absolutely believe it's about people. If you hear me talk to my organisation here, they talk about what's important. I use a people, process, technology mantra, and I go, if I can get the right people, get them working in the right way, you know what? The technology, strategy and delivering projects, everything else will look after itself. But if I don't get the right people working the right way, I won't deliver against that business agenda. I think as a CIO, it's back to maybe the credibility of the role. So it's one of those things, isn't it, where the HR department, the IT department are classic in organisations are getting beaten up by everybody else, about issues. So IT, certainly in day-to-day service, you continue to have the challenge of it's all fine till it's not working. So how are you conquering that challenge? Your challenge continues to be as a CIO to educate your customer base, and certainly I find that here. Some are more educated and understand what technology can bring to them than others. So setting the right expectations, what does a good service look like? Can you benchmark some of that? So that piece of helping the business understand IT and what it can do for you and what you should expect from it. An obstacle now, I'm not sure I use that word, but a real challenge you've still got to do. And then, I would continue with the challenge of having sufficient capability, behind me to deliver on the agenda we're being set. Continues to be a big challenge. I'm not a great sort of futurist in these things, but if I kind of look at where it's heading now, I think I'd have a few phrases. So first would be more commoditisation of the technology. You can take cloud computing as a flavour of that. So can you go to more and more standardisation of the infrastructure and the platforms we all use? I think that is certainly a key move. I think it's interesting to look at open source now. As we start to look at it here in government, we're saying that's something we want to try and embrace. My sense of that now is we're heading to more industrial strength. It's no longer just the proverbial man in the garage, hacker in the garage, knocking out some code. There's some industrial strength capability out there, and how do you harness and really use that? I think that is an interesting shift. And when you take those things together, I think that's going to create a real shift in the IT marketplace. So think about government as we talk about dealing, if you look at the supplier base we'd have dealt with, like many big organisations, the typical big IT suppliers. Well, actually, if I can buy that capability now from open source provision, or I can buy the classic Amazon infrastructure thing, I can go and buy a standard thing from Amazon for a fraction of what I pay over here. I think there's a real marketplace dynamic. And then I think the other piece gets in the whole social media piece, consumerisation of technology. So, in the workplace, the generation we'd be employing as graduates now, and not just that generation, turning up with my iPhone and my iPad and all say, I want to use that. And I'm used to what that technology can do for me. I come into this workplace and I've got this very locked down, restricted environment. I want to work that way. So I think there's all those things are happening now, and they're going to play a bigger role over the next 10 years. However, having said all of that, if I went back and thought about the issues you say facing CIOs, and the question you asked me, I would go, I think a lot of those issues are still the same. They really are, but you're in a different technology landscape and a different culture in which you're working.